But now I must tell you something about the nature of the senses in general. The more easily to explain that of sight in particular. We already know sufficiently well that it is the mind which senses, not the body. For we see that when the mind is distracted by an ecstasy or deep contemplation, the entire body remains without sensation, even though it is in contact with various objects. And we know that it is not properly because the mind is in the parts serving as organs to the exterior senses that it experiences sensation, but because it is in the brain, where it exercises that faculty which is called common sense. But, in order to understand in greater detail how the mind, located in the brain, can thus receive impressions of external objects through the meditation of the nerves, it is necessary to distinguish three things in these nerves. These are, first, the membranes which enclose them, and which, originating in those that enclose the brain, are like little tubes divided in many branches, which goes spreading here and there throughout the members, in the same way as do the veins and the arteries. Second, their interior substance, which extends in the form of little threads throughout the length of these tubes, from the brain whence it originates, all the way to the extremities of the other members where it is attached, such that we can imagine, in each of these small tubes, many of these separate little fibers independent of each other. And finally the animal spirits, which are like a very subtle wind or air which, coming from the chambers or concavities in the brain, flows away by these same tubes throughout the muscles. Now the anatomists and doctors sufficiently acknowledge that these three things are in the nerves, but it seems to me that no one among them has adequately distinguished their uses. We must also assume that it is the small threads composing the interior substance of the nerves which are used for sensation. And inasmuch as I have no need here to speak of movements, I wish you to understand only that these small fibers, being enclosed, as I have said, in tubes which are always inflated and held open by the spirits which they contain, do not crowd or impede each other in any way, and are extended from the brain to the extremities of all parts which are capable of any sensation, in such a way that, however slightly we touch and move the spot in these places where any one of the fibers is attached, we also move at the same instant the place in the brain from which it comes, just as pulling one of the ends of a very taut cord makes the other end move at the same instant. For, knowing that these fibers are so enclosed in the tubes which the spirits always keep slightly inflated and open, it is easy to understand that, even if they were much thinner than those spun by silkworms, and weaker than those of spiders, they still might be extended from the head to the most distant parts without any risk of their breaking. It is necessary to beware of assuming that in order to sense, the mind needs to perceive certain images transmitted by the objects to the brain, as our philosophers commonly suppose, or, at least, the nature of these images must be conceived quite otherwise than as they do. For inasmuch as the philosophers do not consider anything about these images except that they must resemble the objects they represent, it is impossible for them to show us how they can be formed by these objects, received by the external sense organs, and transmitted by the nerves to the brain. And they have had no other reason for positing them except that, observing that a picture can easily stimulate our minds to conceive the object painted there, it seemed to them that in the same way, the mind should be stimulated by little pictures which form in our head to conceive of those objects that touch our senses. Instead, we should consider that there are many other things besides pictures which can stimulate our thought, such as, for example, signs and words, which do not in any way resemble the things which they signify.